where I had my worst seasons of like being tired, being worn out, was when I didn't have people I trusted around me in my area. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up depending on myself more and just overworking myself when I didn't have to. I just needed to build people around me. Crazy thing is, all the people that I ended up finally trusting and building around, they were there. They were right next to me the whole time. I look back and it's like that year that I went through where I was like, I can't trust anybody. I don't have anybody that can do this stuff. They were right there. They were just waiting to be trained. Hey guys, welcome back to the CA podcast. I'm Chad. I'm with Vinny.
Hey, what's up?
And we're filling in for Lance one more time. I know he's sick and tired of us filling in for him, so he'll be back next week. But Vinny, how's your week been?
Busy,
huh?
Busy.
Yeah, it's been busy.
It has been a fun season here at CA.
Yes.
So what I think today, what we should talk about is how when you're busy, right? A lot of people talk about multitasking.
Right, that's a big discussion.
Right, huge. And I think it's a myth.
Right.
So I think we should talk through that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people pride themselves on being multitaskers.
Being able to multitask.
That's like a title.
Right.
Yeah. I'm a multitasker. Yeah.
Yeah, sure you are.
Yeah.
So we find ourselves in a season right now here at CA that we're working on multiple things at the same time. People would say that's multitasking.
Right.
However, you can't really work on multiple things at the exact same time.
No.
So I find myself having to work on this, then work on this, then work on this.
Well,
and it's putting those things into their level of importance.
Right.
Right. So it's really not multitasking. No. You're still working on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
But technically you're working on multiple things.
Right. And the funniest thing that I find about multitaskers, and I'm talking about people that say, I'm a multitasker, and like wear it as a badge. They're always on their phone. Right. They're always not can't hear you at all. And and the funniest thing is, and they're like, I'm a multitasker. And because I had a boss that he was a multitasker, famous multitasker. Right. And you would talk to him and literally everyone would say it. He was always on his phone, or he was like reading something, or he was looking at something and never respond to you. Right. Never hear you. You could literally be up in his face and be like, hey man, what about this? And he'd go, okay. And not hear you whatsoever, but he was a multitasker. Right. So you're right in that sense that it's funny because it's like you look at people like that and they're using a part of their brain to focus on something. Yeah, they may be spinning multiple plates at the same time. They're only thinking about one plate. Right. At a time. And I get it because you can be thinking about multiple things at once, but you're never proficient at one thing when you're doing a bunch of things. Yeah. And I think there are people that are very good at, being able to do many things, right? Right. But in that same token, I had a pastor that was very good at managing and type A personality, high visionary, was able to accomplish a ton of things, and is still doing great things for the Lord today. Right. But here's the thing. He always was the thing about great delegators. Yes. Great delegators. So they're able to get things off of their brain. This is what he would say all the time is I need to get this off of my brain. Yes. Right. And so I need to know that you're going to do that. Yeah. And so that was the way, but he's thinking he's doing things, right? But it's other people doing things for him. Yeah. It's off of his brain though. Yeah. And he's accomplishing great things because of many people who are multitaskers are surrounded by people that do great things. That's a good point. Right. And so, and I think you can be a good multitasker. You can be a person that can accomplish multiple things, but it's because of the people around you that you're able to do so. And we would say, Lance. Yeah, for sure. Right. Huge multitasker. Very big multitasker. Right. Talks about so many things. And this is why we're in so many things right now is because Lance has vision for this, and this. Right. Where is Lance right now? Yeah. He's in Florida working his other business, and he's working on a huge project there with 50 employees and all of that. Great people around him. Yeah, right. And he's also involved here and doing stuff here. Right. And so,
while he's been gone, look at what he's been gone, and look at what's been accomplished. Yeah. Right. And it's all because his vision. Yeah. Right. High visionary, great leader, but the people around him, that make the things happen. And that's phenomenal. Not that he doesn't make things happen. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying he has great people to do that.
Well, and I think with multitasking, a lot of times, with what you're saying is it comes with trust. So the best multitaskers that I've seen, the true multitaskers, they trust people.
That's good.
And so like I think the problem is a lot of times we have to be the ones that do things. And so what that is a lack of trust with people. Because we feel like we're the only one. And sometimes I get it, like with different trades and stuff, like, yeah, you might be the only person that can do a specific thing. But eventually to become like truly a good multitasker, you've got to put trust in people. You have to be, like you're saying, you have to surround yourself with good people, but then you have to surround yourself with people that you trust. Because if you don't trust your people, then you'll end up in like we talked about in the last episode, you'll end up overworking yourself, doing things like that you shouldn't be doing what you feel like you have to do. And it's because a lack of trust. And that's what I found in myself is especially, you know, we both have worked in church for a long time, and you look at it, it's like where I had my, I guess you could say like worst seasons of like just being tired, being worn out, was when I didn't have people I trusted around me in my area. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up depending on myself more and just overworking myself when I didn't have to. I just needed to build people around me. And the crazy thing is, all the people that I ended up finally trusting and building around, they were there. They were right next to me that whole time. I look back, and it's like that year that I went through where I was like, I can't trust anybody. I don't have anybody that can do this stuff. They were right there. They were just waiting to be trained. And they were waiting on me. And it was like, I was the one that was supposed to do that, but then I didn't. And then when I finally did, I look back and go, oh man, like, I missed it. You know what I'm saying? And it's not a bad thing, but
because you're in that space, right? Like a lot of times, and that's the negative of multitasking. Right, is that you start missing things. Right, you start missing like, hey, or you're delaying it. Right, it's like you're missing it or you're delaying it because I can't get to that specific thing at this point in time. Or oh man, I completely forgot. So sorry. I'll get to, you know, it's like, it's impossible. Like, so I've gotten taken out of the shirt department here. Right. Which I think is, I'm so grateful for that. Right. So people keep coming up to me, asking me about shirts. I'm like, no, not my department anymore. Right. Because I was at the point of like, I just forget when somebody would tell me about a shirt, and like, too many things on my plate, you know? 100%. So that multitasking becomes, and that's where it becomes a detriment, right? Or so you're missing things, or it's delayed, and it's like, why haven't I gotten this? Why haven't I gotten that? And those questions start to come because you haven't been able to keep your word or keep your focus on that certain thing because you're doing so many other things.
That's good.
And so I think what happens a lot of times is whether in ministry, whether in work, whatever it is, this is over any parenting. Right?
Oh my gosh!
Like my goodness, the other day, my wife and I we're going to 6 different places. We have literally 6 appointments.
That's crazy.
Right? 6 appointments at so close together. So we had to pick up kid from this school, pick up another kid from this school, pick up another kid from college, right? Then drive to a doctor's appointment. My mother-in-law has to get prescriptions picked up. Like that's like
a lot.
You talk about, we can't be in all these places. We miss a doctor's appointment by 15 minutes and they decline us because we have a policy of whatever. And it's like, kid, what do you mean? We're running around like crazy people, right? And it's like, we miss things because there's so many things going on.
I mean, it's the same thing. So like, it's funny because my wife knows she has to, when I'm in a lot of projects, especially like here at the church or wherever I'm working, she knows that like when I'm heightened with all that stuff, she's got to communicate things 30 times to me.
Right.
Because like when I get home, I don't turn it off initially. And so for the first 2-3 hours, I'm just like, texting, doing my voice memos to people, like, and that's all I'm doing. And so she'll be like, "Oh, I told you this." I'm like, "No, you didn't." She's like, "Yeah, like 3 times." I'm like,
"That's so great."
And so like, yeah, I'm a multitasker, but then I'm missing this stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and so it's funny too, because like even what we were talking about like last week about like the work balance and all that stuff about, you know, overworking and being, you know, kind of over. It's like that goes to our mind too. And that's where the fact is like, yeah, you might be physically home. You might be physically around your family, but like mentally you're like in 35 different places. And that's where I find myself a lot. And I do have to eventually just shut it off and go, all right, it can wait 3 hours, you know, or, you know, it can wait another day, you know, like it doesn't have to be now.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to get into that.
Like,
because when you think about like you're multitasking, you're doing all of these things. So what are some of the processes that you put in place for yourself so that you're not missing things, you're not delaying things? What are some things that you might be doing to help other people out there that are struggling in the same area?
Yeah. So one thing I really lean heavy into is notes. So on my phone, I won't even assign it sometimes. Like I'll just have a thought and I'll put it down. I'll go back later and like assign it to what project I was thinking about.
Right.
But that's one big thing I do. Another thing I do is if I'm communicating with someone else, and like, you know, this, anyone that's really worked with me lately knows, I'll just voice memo.
Right.
So like as soon as I have a thought, I don't text it out. I voice memo it to whoever I'm talking to. I just will say, all right, this, that, the other, that, and then be done with it. And immediately just dump it.
Right.
It's like, okay, it's there. And I put it out. Like, so voice memos and notes for me are two big things because it helps me separate. So in the sense of like, okay, I put it down. I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to go do it. I said it or I wrote it down. Because for me, my biggest problem is remembering what goes where. Like when you're multitasking, because like, especially with what I do, like everything's very similar, right? So like our setup here, their setup there, maybe my buddy's setup here, like everything, I'm trying to remember what goes where.
Right.
And so a lot of times just doing those notes or those voice memos to those specific people help me jog it. So when I get into the conversation, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember it. And then I pull out my notes and I go, okay, that's what I was talking about. Or voice memo, the other person will actually reference to me and it'll jog it.
So like a lot of times for me it's very similar. Right. As I compartmentalize things. Right. Good. So if it's for this compartment, this is what I have to do for that. Right. If it's for this, you know, because I'm in 3 different places as well, family, work, church, right? So we separate them into those categories. But what I learned years ago from the same pastor, that supervisionary or whatever, was a block schedule and how to schedule each thing in. And so for me, I used to write all these things down, but now in my brain, I'm able to like just have it compartmentalized in my brain and I see it as a block, right? So like, because I'm super like visual. So I see every area as a block and I'm like, okay, so if it's church, this is what I have to do when I'm at the church. Boom, 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 boom. Right? If it's at home, this is what we're doing today at home. Boom, 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 boom. And then when it's here, it's like, okay, we're working on 7 different projects, 7 different projects right now. And those are in certain compartments of like where they need to be. Right. And so we've started using a program, a text, you know, an app to kind of help the whole office become a part, because now we have 6 people in the office every day. We got a lot happening here. And now we're trying to get people on the same page. And rather than verbally communicate everything every 5 seconds, it's like, okay, we got the app, we're ready to go. Right. Now we just have to utilize the thing. So,
and I think you said something important there is that you're planning things for each thing.
Right.
A lot of times we'll leave things up to chance.
Right.
In the base of what you just said is that you have a plan. You have a list of things that you're doing. So you have a plan. Okay. This is what I'm doing in this area. This is what I'm
and that's the same thing with your notes. It's me. I'm blocking it in my head.
And so I think that's the thing that we're trying to communicate is have a plan. If you don't have a plan, like if you're multitasking, you're doing multiple things, you're in different projects, you're in different places, and like you said, even home life, if you don't plan it out, it's never going to happen.
It's good.
Because at the end of the day, like when I look at myself, I'm like, there's things that I miss, like you're talking about missing, because I didn't put it on paper and plan it.
Right.
Because I'm like, okay, I know it has to be done, but sometimes I'll skip over it because I'm a very passionate person. So when I get into something, it may not be something I have to do now, but because it's in front of me, I do it when I should have done something, step back and done something else. I'm the one that... There is sometimes I'll go after the shiny object, like, okay, like, oh, you know, clean up all the cables, right? Like that, like when we were building the studio, it's like me, I want to clean up all the cables. It makes me go nuts, but we have to do so much stuff because I have a baby on the way, right? Or possibly already here.
We got to record 6 episodes. We got to do this,
We have to do all this stuff. So it's like, you know what I'd rather do? I'd rather get it all functional, film everything, break it back down. That's more efficient for what we're doing right now.
Right.
But the old Chad would be like, oh, I'm just going to stay till midnight and just tighten all the wires. Like that's because that's what we did last time when we built the studio. I was here till midnight, 2 nights in a row, getting all the wires done. And we had so much to film, and I was just burning myself.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, we can film everything and then break it down and then make it right. So like that's an example for me just now.
Yeah.
But like that's how I see things is like, number one, we're going to do this. Number two, like you said earlier, levels of importance.
Exactly.
What are the levels of importance? And then that's your plan.
Right.
Because a lot of times we don't, and this happens in corporate, this happens in churches, this happens in everywhere. We don't set importances. So we say, hey, we need this done, and we need this done, and we need this done. And no one ever, there's assumed importances. There's never communicated importances. Yeah. So that's one thing we did was like, okay, what's important right now? Okay, we got to get these 2 studios done. Okay, then we got to get this studio done. Yep. Well, what does that entail? Well, there's other importance levels when it comes to the studio.
Yeah, that's so good. Because what happens is, and we wish we were having this problem, is there was miscommunication of, 100%. Man, how come this didn't get done? Right. And it's like, but wait a second, we've been so focused on this thing because we thought that was the important thing. Yep. And no, I really want this to get done. Yep. Okay, so whoever is in charge needs to vocalize the importance of each thing.
Or if you're the person that's doing things, you got to ask the people above you. Okay, what's the expectations here?
And that's important there. Is finding out what the expectation is and finding out the level of importance. Those are 2 huge factors. So what we're saying is, hey, get a plan, right? Either block it out, visualize it, write your notes, set the expectation for it, right? And the importance. And then what we've been doing is we kind of leave dates up to like, hey, we're going to set a date that we kind of want this to be because we're doing so many things that are for months and months ahead of time, right? And so like for you, it might be you have a deadline, right? And so your level of importance might be that deadline where that has to get done by such and such a time. Yeah. We don't usually have a deadline that we have to meet per se, right? Because all this stuff is coming out later. But the fact is, a lot of people have a deadline, so that might be your importance factor when you're figuring out what task to put in front of another and whatever. So multitasking, it's possible. Right. But you're still only focused on one thing at a time. Yeah. 100%. Right. And marking those things off in a level of importance and expectation is super good. I think this went a great way. I think there's probably more to it too. For sure. You know, like for instance, when it's family, when it's work, when it's church, whatever those importance levels, you got to mark those things for yourself. We kind of talked that the last episode, and so there's so much that we can hit on in this. So, what are some other ways that you found yourself being able to multitask? Because you do some crazy stuff. Yeah,
so one of the biggest things that I hit on a little earlier, but communication.
Right.
So that's the one thing is that if you're not communicating. Because you can be communicating to the person that you're working with, but then like to your boss, to whoever, because I just saw that recently, like you don't communicate something. And then there's always going to be, if there's a lack of information, someone's going to fill that void with information. Yeah, and it's going to be the wrong information a lot of times because they don't have the information. Right. So if you're not filling the void of information, then it's going to get filled. And then you're going to have to then correct it, spend more time putting out fires when you could have just been like, okay, this is where this is where I'm at. Right. And you're telling the right people.
Yeah. I think, a lot of times we say communicate. Yeah. I say over communicate.
Oh, for sure.
Because we've kind of learned that throughout processes as well as like, man, we can communicate it once, we can put it on paper. Some people aren't looking at it. Yeah. We can put it. But if you over communicate what you're doing and how you're doing it and where it's at, right? Then it's easier for whoever's above you or below you, right? To make sure that the people below you need to know what they're doing, right? And the person above you needs to know what you're doing, right? So I think over communicating is a good factor, not just communicating.
I like that.
It's over communication. Yeah, and it's an extra text. It's a hey, this is where we're at, and so
that voice memo thing I was talking about. Yeah. That to me, because there's a lot of times you can write text, right? Yeah. You can do 4 or 5 sentences, but the way you say things, especially when you're in an environment where like there's a lot of relationships there, the way you say things is more important than what you say. Right. So because what I'm communicating may seem abrasive, may seem like whatever. Yeah. So if I do something over voice to text, and actually they hear my voice with the voice memo.
So funny you say that.
It's a lot easier.
So we'll talk personal stuff. We don't mind saying stuff around here. So you text Lance, right? And like there's so many times. First off, Lance's phone erases half of his messages. So he's like, "Can you resend that?" And you're like, what? Like I just got a copy paste, right? So you have to resend it, right? And then he comes back, are you mad at me?
Yeah.
No, I'm not mad. I'm responding to your text. You know, it's like it's so funny to me because it's so funny. Yeah. It's just like you read things, like and perceive things way differently than the person that's
in
texting.
That person's persona you have in your head, devoid of information.
It's so good.
That's what
exactly
is.
What you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so what we've learned here is like we're not like we hardly text anymore.
No, we do a lot of phone calls.
It's literally
voice.
Let's just talk because otherwise we're miscommunicating, right?
Yep.
And so now it's like, all right, just call because it's so much easier. You're not having to read it. You're not, you know, you're not internalizing what I'm trying to say or how I'm trying to say it.
Because the crazy thing about it, you think about it, and it's like, how many times have you projected something that you thought onto somebody's text, and you're like, they didn't mean that at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
And it just comes across that way because, like, you're in the state of mind you are, they're in the state of mind they are. Yeah. They use an adjective that you associate with some bad thing that happened in your life, and now, like, that's their problem now. It's just like, you know, and so, but then you get tone behind a voice, and you're like, oh, he didn't mean it like my dad did. You know, like, it's like that type of thing, you know, like, because it's funny because, like, I look at it sometimes, like, I'll associate hurt in my past with, like, certain words. And I read it, I'm like, what did they mean by that? And it's like they didn't mean anything by it. And so, like, I think that's where, like, what we're talking about is we're also talking about the human side of all of this, because multitasking, a lot of times, if you're multitasking, you're involved with other people.
Right, and you're taking the human out of it, and you're like almost in robot mode, right? And so you're thinking robot mode, and then when a human interacts with you, you're like,
100%.
You know, it's like, man, and it kind of blows up in your face. Or when you become robot mode and it literally are just like, you know, I need, you know,
systematic.
Yeah, and it's like, wait a second, there's humans involved.
Well, and that's the other thing is, like, sometimes you have to decide, okay, with multitasking, with all the projects you're dealing with, are you going to do it dynamic or are you going to do linear? So in the sense of like that's 1, 2, 3, 4, but sometimes it's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 can all be done different. 5 has to be done last. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, there's things where, like, oh, I could jump to 3 and then come back and do 1, because sometimes momentum is something that really is helpful with multitasking. Is what I realized and had this moment last night was, like, we were building all this stuff, right? And there wasn't a real change. But then when we swapped over some things, that's when the real change happened. And we really needed that because now it's like a lift to, like, good to the finish line. Yes. Because now it's like super visual. Like, now you see what we've been trying to accomplish.
Right.
But because of some different things in the system, the change wasn't really there unless you looked for it.
Right.
Now it's in your face.
Right. And then,
we needed that boost of morale to go, oh, we're doing this right.
It's really good. And I know you've talked other times about taking a step back.
Yes.
Right. And walking away from the one thing that you've been so focused on, and then, you know, maybe focus on something else, and the moment of clarity comes for the thing that you were stuck on.
Yep.
And so, like, that's pretty cool. Like, and you know, when you're multitasking, that you're able to, you know what, I'm stuck in this place right here. Let me go over here. Let me focus on this for a little bit, and then something pops, right? And you're like, oh, that's what I can do over here. Yeah. And then you run back to that next 100%. Thing. And, you know, so we do multitask with it, not saying it's a complete myth, but we're saying, like, literally you can't focus on two things at the same time. You have to,
so much you're having to juggle.
Right. It's you know, your brain can work things out and whatever. However, right, you're still on that one thing that you're working on.
The basis of the test for me is if someone can't text or do something on their phone and have an actual conversation, they're not a multitasker.
Impossible.
And it's impossible for most every human. Right. And the people that say they can, they can't. Because if you had them do, like, one of those things where you got to do, like, the Wordle thing and have also carry on, like, a thoughtful conversation, there's no way they're either having a thoughtful conversation or doing Wordle.
Right. So my wife, this is we'll get personal, right?
Yeah.
So with the other day, she's telling me a story,
right?
And I'm on my phone, right? I'm not even there.
You're not in
the
same world.
No, not even close, right?
Yep.
And, you know, I'm watching some documentary or something on my phone, and she's trying to tell me something and she just goes, "Do you hear me?" And I'm like, no. And so, like, that's what we're talking. There's no way that you can do that in your work environment either, where you're trying to get so many things done, whether it's, you know, accounting, whether it's, you know, papers, whatever it is. Like you have to get your focus right. And so I think we came up with some pretty good ways to multitask in the right way, which is, creating expectations, right? Creating level of importance, planning, right? Processes, and then make sure that, you're working to the best of your ability. And I think that right there is the myth of multitasking at its finest. So
that's good. So, well, all right. Thanks for joining us today. You'll probably see Lance next week, and see you later.